Welcome to another episode of Jay's Garage. We're going to talk about motorcycles today, one of the most iconic motorcycles of all time, the Indian 4. It's sort of fitting we have it here in front of the steam engines. This is a 1933, that's an 1832. So this is 101 years newer than that model. And the one thing they have in common is they both got a lot of torque, a lot of bottom end torque. All Indians are derived from essentially the Henderson 4. The Henderson brothers, they built the Henderson, they built the Ace, Indian bought out Ace. So there's a lot of similarities between them. I've had this motorcycle a little over 25 years. When I bought it, although it was somewhat of a classic, it was still an old bike. I remember at the time a buddy of mine said to me, "How much you pay for that?" You know, you could have bought a brand new Honda 1000. That's right. Ooh, now I could get 10 of them. But never mind that. If you buy what you like, and you hang on to it, it doesn't matter if it goes up or down. If it goes up, great. If it doesn't, well, you still got something you like. And it's one of the most fun bikes to ride. You know, one thing about these Indian 4s, it's the best riding slow bike, or the best bike to ride slow. You know, when you put it in second, you can go right, even third, you can go down to 5 or 6 miles an hour. It's a great bike for going over fire roads and cow trails, and that's kind of what the roads were like back when this was built. But that doesn't mean it's not a high-speed road bike either. These will run 60, 65 on the freeway, no problem. I mean, there's a lot of stupid myths about them. They don't overheat. The rear cylinder doesn't glow red. I think it's one of the best-looking bikes of all time. I mean, look at it from the front. Look how thin it is. I guess it's putting out about 35, 40 horse, something like that. 77 cubic inches. I think it's 1,300 cc's, 1,265, something like that. But a wonderful bike to drive. You got a foot clutch, you got a hand shift. All Indians were right-hand throttle, but a lot of people switched them over. Believe me, that'll drive you crazy. You're going down the road, and then you just go to the left-hand throttle. Okay, you don't have to be a purist. The rumor was that the police liked it because they could draw their weapon and fire. It could be one of those myths, I don't know. But the nice thing about it is not an automobile engine. A lot of people say, oh, it's a 4-cylinder automobile engine cut down. No, it is designed uniquely, specifically for motorcycle use. It's what they call an F-head, which is inlet over exhaust. The inlet valve is over the exhaust valve. You have these little, what they call them, tobacco can covers here. You open those, and you squirt a little oil in there once in a while. There's a felt pad in there, and that keeps everything well lubricated. It's got an oil pump, as well as splash. Here's your carburetor here. New on this model for 33 was a Schliebler carburetor. No air cleaner, because as you know, air was much cleaner back in the 30s. I don't know why they didn't put an air cleaner. They just didn't do it. You can put one on if you want, and I probably should, but you know, been going pretty good for the last 25 years, so I haven't had to. The only thing I added was an oil pressure gauge, but that was an option at the time. It has what they call the telltale speedometer. Take a look at that. When the police would chase you, this red needle would stay at the highest speed they achieved. And the car, you'd say, I wasn't speeding. The car, well, yes, you were. Look, I had to go 50 to catch you. Ooh, well, there you go. The fun thing is sometimes get it up to 80 and just leave it on there. So when you park it, guys come by and they go, ooh, you took it to 80, ooh. Top speed was about 90 miles an hour on this, about 88, 90 miles an hour. But it's not about top speed. It's about just being smooth and dependable. Don't forget, cars weren't that dependable back in the 30s. I restored this bike 83, 84, something like that. And it's held up really well. For a while, it was pretty close to being my everyday bike. I used it a lot to go to work and get around town. Because back in the 80s, even though it was somewhat of a classic, it was still an old motorcycle, and you could get them reasonably well. Unfortunately, the last couple of years, they've kind of gone crazy, but it's really one of the first super bikes, I think. I mean, imagine, you know, everybody raved about the Honda CB750 when it came out in '69. Ooh, 4 cylinders, disc brakes. This had 4 cylinders in '33. Foot brake here, clutch here. You could hold the clutch down with this little lever right here. So you're at a stoplight, that would hold the clutch down. I prefer to put it in neutral, but you can do that there. This is your advance and your retard right here. Notice the cables all run inside. Very nicely done. You got your horn. Look, a real horn. Even bikes today have wimpy horns. This had a pretty good horn. The cool thing about it is it's all automotive technology or dependability. The big generator there, 6 volt, that works pretty good. You got a sprung seat here as well. It's a hardtail, of course. Speedometer drive back here. You got a little toolbox to keep things in. That's your breather right there. to atmosphere. You have an ammeter gauge, as I said, beautiful speedometer, twin fuel tanks. You have this little deal here. What this was this is the idea was you could shoot a little fuel directly into the carburetor on a freezing cold day, but if you're driving this on a freezing cold day, well. I moved the bike around so you can see the other side, and I want to point out that spot of oil right there, that is not from the Indian. That's from some foreign car that was parked here. Indian 4s do not leak oil. All right, let's continue. This is what they call a 433. Under a new designation system, the 4 stands for 4-cylinder, 33 stands for 1933. Same way 434 would be a 4-cylinder, 1934, and so on. For the first time, it was available with battery ignition. On the battery ignition model, the distributor was mounted at the rear end of the generator. You had new cylinders, larger fins around the exhaust port. They were constantly doing updates on these things. For 33, they offered additional chromium plating items, most frequently requested, handlebars, things like that. This has some of those items, but not all of them. 14mm spark plugs were new this year instead of the 18mm. Overheating might be a little bit more of a problem today than it was back in the 30s and 40s because of faster roads. And a guy named Max Bubeck is the king of Indian 4s. There's some modification you can do, drill a crankshaft, add an oil cooler, oil filter. A lot of people do that. I always just kind of like to keep them stock, and they run fine. I've never had this one overheat on me. And there's really no torque reaction in these two. When you're sitting at a light and you rev the engine, yeah, it'll rock back and forth, but once you're in gear, it won't throw you to the right like a BMW twin. There are many variations of this color, Indian red. I'm not sure what the actual color is. This is pretty close to what I found on the bike originally. As I said, this paint job is, 25 years old, and this still holds up pretty nice. I should have gone with stainless steel spokes at the time. I went with steel spokes. They get a little bit of rust on them. So when you restore these bikes, you're always best to go with stainless steel spokes, or you could paint them if you like. But as I said, they're pretty bulletproof and pretty agricultural, and they start. That's a nice thing. Let's fire it up. Put your key on. Open your fuel taps. Got advance and retard here. Got your horn. Let's see what she does. One kick, Lottie. Try that with a big knucklehead. Now, if you have a knucklehead, don't go write me a letter. I have knuckleheads too. It's that Indian Harley thing been going on for 100 years, and it still continues, so it's just a joke. But you see how smooth it is. It doesn't rock on the stand. It doesn't vibrate. And that great exhaust note. A mistake a lot of guys make is they ride an old bike and they go, I'm going to get an old style helmet. One of those cork ones. Don't do that. Get yourself like an Arise. It's about the best helmet you could get. Because let's face it, on an old bike, you're more likely to have an accident than you are on a modern bike with anti-lock brakes and all the features. This has what they call anti-stop brakes. You can slow down swiftly, but you really can't stop. So always wear a full face helmet when you're riding an older bike. I know it looks kind of strange, but not as strange as that does when you're in the hospital. So sorry for the lecture, Mr. Keller. The interesting thing about the 1933 models, front end was a little higher and you sat a little lower. So you got the feeling of sitting in the motorcycle rather than sitting on it. And it really does work. This is really one of the most comfortable bikes of any period in history. When you drop it into high gear, the revs drop down and you just feel that incredible torque pulling you. This bike weighs about 500 pounds. The early years were about 450. Everything is overbuilt. Everything is built strong. As you see, shifting. Boom. Obviously, you can't speed shift it, but you can shift pretty quickly. And I would say this is one of the few classic bikes you could ride, as a modern bike and go to work every day with it. You're not going to keep up with, obviously, the modern super bikes, but that's not the idea behind it. It is the most relaxing motorcycle to drive. As I said, you just go down the road. Look at that. Front end absorbs all the bumps. You got your big spring in front, taking the bumps out. You see it working. Beautiful chassis, well thought out. One of the great motorcycles of all time. And these were great for sidecar work as well. You just bolt the sidecar on the side of it, boom, you take the family. Trouble was, these were about 420 bucks when a Model T was 260. And if you had a family, there's really no reason why you need this. You know, a lot of old bikes, you drive them all, and then you look at your watch and both hands are falling off because you're vibrating so much. Not with these, dead smooth. Even the bumps aren't too bad with this sprung saddle. Like I say, you put it in third gear, and the revs drop down to nothing. And it still pulls strong. I love riding this bike. Just that low-end torque. I would take this over any of the English or European bikes of the period, just because not only were they fast, but as I said, extremely dependable. Some people call these a suicide clutch, but you know, you just reach down, put it in gear, put it in neutral, roll to a stop. You know, a lot of guys get scared by these foot clutch hand shift things. Really nothing to worry about. It's just a matter of what you're used to. If you grew up with it, it becomes second nature. I kind of like it, actually. It's in some ways, well, I don't know if it's easier than the hand clutch, but you just get used to it. And it's a lot of fun to use. You know, one of the great things about these bikes is so many bikes, you never know what gear you're in. You click it, you know, you've got this long lever here. It's very agricultural. You put it, you know you're in second. You hear it click into each gear. It's very satisfying. It's got these big gears that just do this when you move that lever. No crunching. Very nicely put together. Modern style clutch. Just a wonderful bike. And you know, there's a lot of terrific books out. Jerry Hatfield, a bunch of these guys. There's a book called The Golden Age of the Fours. It's a terrific book. There's a lot written on them. And they're a lot of fun. These motors are not simple. Unless you're a mechanic, don't get into this motor yourself, because it's more complicated than you think. But it's a brilliant, brilliant design. And just a wonderful, wonderful riding bike. Look how smoothly it takes off. The only thing missing, a rear view mirror. See you next week.